I wasn't supposed to be driving that late. My meetings had dragged on longer than expected, and by the time I left the city, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. I was tired, mentally drained, and physically sore from hours in a stiff conference room chair. The highway stretched out before me in long, dark ribbons. My GPS kept chirping to stay on the main road, but I was getting restless. Every few miles, red brake lights shimmered ahead like reflections in a puddle. Construction, traffic, tailgaters. It was all too much. That's when I saw the exit. It wasn't marked clearly, just a small green sign half hidden by overgrown brush. No town name, just a symbol, a crooked arrow, and a number I didn't recognize. For reasons I still can't explain, I took it. I told myself it was a shortcut, a back road, a chance to get off the congested main drag and maybe even make better time, but I think part of me was curious. I don't remember deciding to turn, I just remember doing it. The moment I left the highway, everything changed. The noise dropped off completely. No hum of tires, no distant horns, not even the static from my radio. Just a strange, pressing silence, the kind that fills your ears with your own heartbeat. The road narrowed quickly, 2 lanes of worn asphalt surrounded by dark trees that seemed to lean a little too close. My headlights cut through the branches, and I caught brief flashes of what looked like old barbed wire, maybe remnants of farmland. But there were no houses, no lights, not even power lines. It wasn't fear I felt, not yet. It was more like an ache in the gut, like a mistake I couldn't name. Something about the way the air felt heavier, like it hadn't moved in years. And somewhere, barely audible beneath the hum of my engine, I swear I heard something breathing. But when I stopped the car and rolled down the window, there was nothing but windless dark. The road went on much longer than it should have. I kept expecting it to reconnect with a larger highway, maybe cut across to Route 7 or spit me out near one of the neighboring towns. But no matter how far I drove, there were no signs, no intersections, just the same narrow strip of cracked pavement and the same leaning trees pressing in on both sides like they were trying to keep me there. I glanced at the GPS again. It had frozen. The blue arrow marking my location was just floating. No road beneath it, no compass direction, just a blank stretch of green like I'd wandered off the map entirely. Then I noticed something strange. The trees to my left were different than the ones to my right. Not just species or shape, but age. One side of the road looked like it had just survived a wildfire. Charred trunks, scorched earth, brittle undergrowth. The other side looked untouched, even vibrant. Lush pines, thick moss, the kind of deep forest green you only see in postcards. It was like 2 timelines pressed against each other, and I was driving between them. That's when I saw the sign. It came up suddenly, like it hadn't been there a second before. Welcome to Greymouth. The letters were hand-painted, cracked with age. The wooden post holding it up leaned at a dangerous angle. There was no population count, no motto, just the name and the strange, almost mocking way it seemed to emerge from the trees. I slowed down, suddenly unsure if I should keep going, but I couldn't turn around. The road had narrowed even more, with thick brush on either side and no clear spot to pull a U-turn, so I kept driving. Just ahead, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, like distant streetlights through fog. Shapes began to emerge. Rooftops, telephone poles, an old gas station with a flickering light above the pumps. No movement, no cars, just that same eerie silence. And then, something crossed the road up ahead, too fast to see clearly, but it stopped walking halfway across, turned, and looked directly at me. I slammed the brakes, hard. The tires squealed against the cracked asphalt, the whole car shuddering to a halt. I leaned forward, eyes wide, scanning the road for something, anything. But whatever had crossed, it was gone. All I had seen was a silhouette, human-like maybe, too tall, too thin, no features I could recognize, just the shape of a head turning toward me, pausing for half a second like it knew I was looking, then vanishing into the shadows. I sat there for a while, gripping the wheel, trying to slow my breathing. I kept telling myself it was probably just a deer, or a coyote, maybe even a trick of the headlights. That's what rural roads are like, right? Things jump out, your mind fills in the gaps, nothing supernatural, nothing to worry about. But the truth is, I didn't believe that. Not really. Because what rattled me wasn't just what I saw, it was what I felt. Like I'd been noticed, like something had clocked me, registered my presence in a way that wasn't casual or accidental, the way a predator watches something that's strayed too far from the herd. Still, I couldn't just sit there forever. I eased my foot off the brake and slowly rolled forward, trying not to look into the woods. The glow on the horizon was stronger now, and within a few minutes, I rolled into the edge of what could loosely be called a town. Small buildings lined either side of the street, Abandoned, from what I could tell. A grocery store with shattered windows. A diner with rusted metal stools still visible through the grime-smeared glass. Street lamps stood like crooked teeth, flickering weakly, as if on the edge of remembering how to shine. No people, no noise, no movement. And still, no wind. Even my car's engine sounded wrong here. Too loud, like it didn't belong, like I didn't belong. I pulled over near the gas station and killed the engine. The silence that followed fees. Lot heavier than before. Almost personal. And deep down, some quiet voice inside me whispered the thing I didn't want to admit. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I sat in the car for a long time. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe more. I kept waiting for something to change. A porch light to flicker on. A car to pass by. A voice. A cough. Anything. But the town stayed still, as if it were listening, or waiting for me to make the first move. Eventually, I stepped out. The air was cold in a way that didn't match the season. It wasn't winter, but it felt like it had just snowed somewhere nearby. Dry. Hollow. And the smell. There was something sharp in it, a faint metallic sting, like rust or blood. Beneath that, the sick, sweet scent of damp wood and decay. The gas station looked like it hadn't operated in years, but the overhead light above Pump 3 was flickering weakly, casting long, twitching shadows across the concrete. I walked to the glass door. No posters, no hours, just a dusty open sign hanging crookedly on the inside. I pushed the door open. A tiny bell jingled overhead, startling me more than it should have. Inside, the station looked staged. There was no dust on the counter, no clutter. Shelves were half-stocked with old, outdated snacks, brands I hadn't seen in decades. A row of glass door refrigerators hummed softly, though nothing was inside them but condensation and empty cartons. Still, no one. I cleared my throat. Hello? My voice sounded unnatural in the space, like it didn't belong to me. No answer. There was a stool behind the counter, slightly turned, as if someone had just stood up. I waited. Nothing. I stepped behind the counter and glanced at the register. It was open. Empty. That was the first time I felt it, that sense of being observed. Not watched from outside, but from inside the room. Like the walls themselves were taking note of me, judging my steps, holding their breath. I left the station quickly, trying not to look at my reflection in the glass, because for a second, I swear, I thought I saw someone standing behind me, and I was alone. I walked down the main street, hugging the center of the road because I didn't trust the sidewalks. The storefronts were all intact, but unnaturally clean, not freshly renovated, just untouched, as if no time had passed at all, like they'd been preserved, or staged. A diner with red leather booths and a neon sign that flickered in and out of legibility. A barber shop with perfectly placed chairs and combs on the counters. A pharmacy with pill bottles still neatly lined up behind the counter. But no people, no dust, no sounds. At one point, I passed a bench with a newspaper laid out perfectly on the seat. I leaned down to read the date. March 19th, 1987. It should have felt absurd. It should have made me laugh or scoff or assume this was some elaborate prank. But nothing about this place made me feel like laughing. Then something caught my eye. In one of the buildings across the street, a 2-story brick place that looked like it might have once been a boarding house, I saw movement, just for a second. A figure standing behind a 2nd-story window, motionless, staring directly at me. I froze. My mouth went dry. I waited for them to move, wave, open the window, anything, but they just stood there, watching. And then they were gone. No step back, no curtain movement, just vanished like they'd been wiped away. I rushed across the street, heart pounding, and stared up at the window. There was no one. Nothing. Just an old lace curtain swaying gently behind the glass, except there was no wind. I tried the front door. Locked. I knocked. No answer. As I stood there, I became aware of how quiet it really was. No birds, no insects, not even the faint buzz of power lines. It was a kind of silence that felt wrong, like the world had skipped a beat, like I was in a photograph, something frozen. And then faintly, from the alley behind me, I heard it. A slow, deliberate knock. Key, 3 times. Not on wood, not on a door. It sounded like it was coming from inside my car. I didn't run, not at first. I stood frozen in place, trying to convince myself I'd misheard. Maybe it was an echo. Maybe the sound bounced off one of the old buildings or a loose shutter, but in my gut, I knew. That wasn't an accident. That knock, 3 steady raps, sounded deliberate, too measured to be wind or wood settling. And worst of all, it had come from a place I had just left. My locked car. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the empty street. My car sat where I'd parked it. Driver's side door still closed, no signs of damage. Nothing inside from what I could see, but that didn't ease the dread swelling in my chest. I started walking back toward it, half expecting to see someone crouched behind the rear bumper or slipping into the passenger seat. But the closer I got, the more I felt it again. That sensation of being observed. Not stalked, not chased. Observed. Like something had already taken an interest in me and was now just watching to see what I'd do next. I opened the car door and sat behind the wheel, hands trembling slightly. The air inside was cold, colder than it had been when I left it. I checked the back seat. Empty. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that someone, something, had been there. I reached for the ignition, then paused. My rearview mirror showed the street behind me. Empty, lifeless, gray. But for a split second, I thought I saw someone step out of a doorway across the street, a tall figure in black, face obscured, just standing there. No movement. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. I started the engine and sat there with it idling, headlights cutting across the empty road like weak flashlights in a fog. I considered turning around, but where would I even go? The road I came in on had already felt like a one-way path, and my GPS was still frozen. I whispered to myself quietly, as if trying to make it true. It's just an abandoned town, that's all. But I didn't believe it. Not anymore. I didn't drive away. I wish I had. God, I wish I had. But something about this place, it kept me tethered. I sat in the car for maybe another 10 minutes, waiting for my nerves to calm, hoping some rational explanation would drift into my head like a lifeline. None came. I even turned the radio on just to break the silence, but it only hissed static. No stations. Not even a whisper of interference. So I got back out. I don't know why I thought walking around would help. Maybe I just didn't want to feel like I was hiding. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it was all in my head, that I was just tired, stressed, and spooked by an empty town with a weird vibe. But as I wandered deeper into Greymouth, yes, that's what the sign had said, I realized something that made my stomach twist. Every street was familiar. Not in a deja vu kind of way, not like, this reminds me of my hometown, or I've seen this layout before. I mean exactly familiar. Like I'd walked these streets before, like I knew where the alley behind the pharmacy led, or how many steps it took to reach the church steps from the corner lamppost. I knew it, but I'd never been here, not once. I turned a corner and found myself on a residential street. Old houses lined either side, Victorian style, weathered but oddly intact. A few had cracked paint and dead lawns, but others looked preserved, curtains drawn, doors shut, like the owners had just stepped out and hadn't come back yet. One house had a light on upstairs. I stopped walking. My throat went dry again. That quiet, brittle voice in my head whispered, "Go back to the car. Get out while you can." But I didn't. Instead, I stepped onto the sidewalk and began moving toward the house, drawn to it like a magnet. Not because I wanted to, but because it felt inevitable, like something was waiting, and it knew I was coming. The house wasn't locked. The front door creaked open with barely a push, like it had been left ajar just for me. I hesitated in the doorway, half expecting an alarm or a barking dog or even a voice asking who I was. But there was nothing. Inside, the air was stale and cold, like the place had been closed up for decades. Yet there was no dust, no cobwebs. Everything was too still, too pristine. The furniture was arranged perfectly. A couch facing a blank TV, a coffee table with a coaster still resting beneath an empty glass, a hallway that stretched into the back of the house, dark and uninviting. And from upstairs, light. A warm amber glow spilled softly down the steps. I couldn't hear anything, but the silence itself had taken on a kind of density. Like the house was filled with something invisible, watching, waiting, just out of reach. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" It felt like a stupid thing to say the moment the words left my mouth. They bounced around the room and came back to me smaller, like echoes swallowed by thick walls. No reply. Still, I climbed the stairs. Each step creaked softly under my weight. the kind of creak that makes your bones tighten. The air grew colder the higher I went, though the light, faint and warm, continued to glow just ahead. The upstairs hallway was narrow, 3 doors on either side, all closed. The last door at the end, however, was open. That's where the light was coming from. I moved toward it slowly, each step deliberate. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned out everything else. I stopped just outside the room, took a breath, and leaned in. It was a bedroom, simple, neat. An old bed with a handmade quilt, a vanity with a tarnished mirror, and in the far corner, a rocking chair. Still, and then without warning it moved, just once, a single deliberate rock, but no one was sitting in it. I didn't scream, I didn't run, I just stood there frozen in the doorway, staring at the rocking chair as it slowly settled back into stillness. It wasn't the kind of movement you'd get from wind or footsteps on loose floorboards. It had weight behind it, like someone had just stood up from it, like I'd just missed them. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. The chair didn't move again, and the room remained as lifeless as before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd walked in on something, interrupted something, like whoever, or whatever, had been there, was now somewhere else, maybe behind the door, maybe behind me. I backed out of the room slowly, not daring to turn my back on it until I was halfway down the hall. I didn't look into the other rooms. I didn't want to know what was behind those closed doors. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, my hands were shaking. The silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded, like the house was holding something in, like I was being given a chance to leave before that thing came back. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me gently, as if slamming it might provoke something. Back on the street, the sky hadn't changed. Still that dull, colorless gray. Not night, not day. My phone showed the same time it had since I'd arrived. 3:17 p.m. It hadn't budged. The battery hadn't drained. The screen wasn't frozen. The time was. That's when I realized the streets were looping. I walked 2 blocks in what I thought was a straight line, but I ended up back in front of the same gas station, the same flickering light, the same dented trash can. I tried another direction. Same result. The layout of the town didn't follow logic anymore. It was like Greymouth had rearranged itself around me, and standing there, hands in my pockets, breath fogging in the motionless air, I finally accepted something that had been gnawing at me since I turned off the highway. This place wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. I don't remember deciding to stay. That's the part that haunts me more than anything else. I just didn't leave. 1 minute I was standing in the middle of the street debating whether to get back in my car or try one more route out of town. The next, I was sitting on a bench in front of the post office, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, watching the unmoving sky. I looked at my phone again, 3:17 p.m. Still. It wasn't just that the time hadn't changed, it was the way the phone reacted to touch. It worked in the mechanical sense. The screen lit up, the battery meter flickered, but every app, maps, browser, messages just opened to a blank white page and never loaded anything. No signal, no error, just white. I thought about trying to call someone, but when I opened the dialer, there were no contacts. My call history was gone. Even my own number was missing. Just a name at the top of the screen. Unknown. I put the phone away. Across the street, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small clock tower, worn and leaning slightly, standing atop what looked like an old schoolhouse. It had no hands, just a blank face. The numbers faded, almost rubbed off. I walked toward it, hoping to find someone, anything to make this place feel real again. But when I got close, I realized something else. The school bell was ringing, faintly, not loud, not sharp, just a distant rhythmic chime that echoed like it had traveled through thick fog, the kind of sound that feels like it's not being heard with your ears, but remembered, like a dream bleeding into wakefulness. I stopped beneath the tower and looked up, shielding my eyes. There was no bell, no mechanism, no rope, nothing that could have made the sound. Still it rang, and for the first time since I arrived in Gray, Mouth, I felt the passage of time, not forward, but backward. As if something here remembered a moment I hadn't lived yet. The sound of the bell faded, but the feeling it left behind clung to me, like I'd brushed up against something alive. I stepped into the schoolhouse. The front doors opened with a reluctant groan, the hinges shrieking just enough to make me flinch. The interior was soaked in a dusty amber light, though I couldn't find a source. No working fixtures, no windows that should have let in that hue. The air smelled like old paper, rotting wood, and, faintly, chalk. I walked the hallway slowly, Lockers lined the walls, dented and rust-stained. Some were slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. I passed old class photos framed in glass, their black and white faces smiling stiffly, decades out of date. That's when I noticed it. In every photograph, in every class, there was a face I recognized. Mine. Sometimes younger, sometimes older. Sometimes in the back row, other times right in front, always with a different name printed underneath. But the face was always me. I backed away, dizzy. This didn't make sense. None of it. I'd never been here before, never heard of this town, so how could I be in photos from 30, 40, even 60 years ago? I turned a corner and found myself in front of a classroom door labeled Room 3. It was open just a crack. I don't know why I went inside. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I didn't choose to. Maybe the town wanted me to. Inside, rows of desks faced a chalkboard filled with scribbles that pulsed in my vision, like they were being written even as I looked at them. I approached the teacher's desk. Laid out neatly was a lesson plan, dated, labeled, signed by a name I didn't know, yet the handwriting was undeniably mine. Behind me, a chair scraped loudly across the tile floor. I spun around. A student was sitting in one of the desks, head down, silent. I took a slow step forward, my mouth open to speak, but before I could, the student vanished, not faded, not ran, just wasn't there anymore, and the classroom was empty again. I backed out of that classroom like I was walking away from the edge of a cliff. The chair was still there, the desk still angled slightly where it had been moved, but the student, whatever it had been, was gone. The room returned to stillness as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. It wasn't just hallucination. It wasn't just fear. I felt it deep in my chest, this pressure, this wrongness, like I was occupying a memory that didn't belong to me. I stumbled back into the hallway, gripping the doorframe for balance. The air in the school had shifted, heavier now, like something had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. A low hum began vibrating faintly through the walls, barely audible but felt in my teeth and bones. I left, rushed out really. The daylight, or whatever passed for it here, hadn't changed. The sky was still that flat, colorless gray. No shadows, no breeze, no birds. My car was still parked at the curb. I checked my phone again, 3:17 p.m. Still, I stared at the screen, willing the numbers to move. Just a minute, just 1 minute, but the digits remained frozen, as though time itself had been amputated from this place. Or maybe just from me. That's when it hit me. I didn't know how long I'd been here. I remembered arriving. I remembered walking the streets. But in between, the sequence had started to blur. I couldn't tell how many hours had passed. Had I eaten? Had I drank water? Was the sun supposed to have moved by now? I sat on the curb, head in my hands, and for the first time since I took that wrong turn off the highway, I let panic start to take root. What if time wasn't stuck? What if I was? What if the town was still moving, growing, shifting, and I was just the part it had decided to trap and study? Somewhere in the distance, that faint screech bell rang again, soft, hollow, like the end of a class that never started. And I realized I might never leave this place. Because what's the point of escaping when you no longer know when you are? That night, if you can call it night, I decided to sleep in my car. It wasn't the safest choice, I knew that, but after what I saw in the school, the thought of stepping into another building, another trap, made my skin crawl. At least the car felt familiar. Mine. A bubble of the outside world I still had control over. I reclined the seat, locked all the doors, and pulled my jacket tight around me. It was cold again, not the kind of cold that stings. Worse, the kind that sinks in. Like the air here didn't just drop in temperature, but pulled warmth out of you. Slowly, deliberately. I stared out the windshield at the gas station's flickering light. It pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Sometimes I thought I saw movement in the reflection of the glass, figures passing just out of frame. But whenever I looked directly, there was nothing. I don't remember falling asleep. But I remember waking up, because when I did, the car was full of static. Not just the radio, not just the speakers, the air. The sound vibrated against the glass, buzzed beneath my skin. My ears rang, my teeth hurt. My phone had turned itself on and was lighting up the console with that same bright white screen. No text, no call, just a glowing notification. Incoming call, unknown. I stared at it, heart thudding. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I answered. I shouldn't have, but I did. At first, there was silence, just my breath, the hum of the phone against my ear, and that endless static buzzing faintly in the background. Then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Raspy. Not male, not female, not even human, maybe, but horribly familiar. It said, "You shouldn't have come here." I froze. That voice. It wasn't just sound. It reached into me. Not like someone was speaking into my ear, but like they were inside my head, using my own thoughts to echo. I couldn't move, couldn't even think clearly, just to it. That sentence, repeating and overlapping, "You shouldn't have come here." I whispered back, "Who are you?" The silence after was worse than the voice itself. For a moment I thought the call had dropped, but then the static surged again and something new came through. A sound, faint but unmistakable. My own voice, whispering from the other end of the call. Except, it wasn't something I'd said before. Not out loud, not ever. It was a thought I'd had, hours ago, when I'd first turned off the highway. I should turn back. That same sentence, whispered in my voice, looped softly through the speaker. I listened, heart pounding, as it repeated, warped and echoing like it had been recorded from inside my mind. And then, another voice layered on top, not mine. Lower, rougher, breathing words like steam on a mirror. "You were expected." The line cut off. The car went dark. Everything, the phone, the console, even the headlights that had been dimly reflecting off the gas station sign, just died. No engine noise, no dashboard lights, nothing. It was like the vehicle had been unplugged from the world. I reached for the door handle, tried to force it open, it wouldn't budge. I unlocked and relocked it. Nothing. Panic gripped me, and then the rearview mirror moved. I swear to you, it tilted on its own, slowly angling downward until I wasn't seeing the empty road behind me anymore. I was seeing something in the back seat. A figure. Not clear, just the impression of a presence. Something hunched, featureless, like a smudge on the air itself. It didn't move, but I felt it watching. My hands trembled as I looked behind me, but the seat was empty. Still, the mirror didn't lie, and neither did that voice. I scrambled out of the car. I don't even remember how I got the door open. Just that 1 second I was trapped inside, and the next I was on the pavement, gasping, knees scraped, palms bloodied. I didn't care. I just needed out. The cold hit me instantly, but it was a relief, like I'd broken free of something, a pressure, a presence. The air outside, while freezing, didn't hum the way it did inside the car. The static was gone. The thing in the mirror, gone too. But I couldn't unsee it. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, staring at the vehicle like it might come alive again, like the windows might fog up from the inside, or that awful voice would return, whispering things I hadn't even thought yet. I looked at my phone. Dead. I tried the gas station door again. Still locked. And that's when I realized something that hadn't clicked until now. There were no stars, no moon, not even clouds. Just empty black sky, like someone had drawn a thick curtain over the entire town. And I knew, this place, it wasn't on any map. It wasn't lost. It was waiting. Waiting for people like me who wandered too far off course, who were tired, distracted, desperate for a shortcut or a break in routine. People who took wrong turns, the kind of people who could vanish without setting off alarms, who'd be chalked up to missing hikers or runaways or just accidents. I was supposed to be one of them. But I wasn't. Not yet. That night, I walked. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving, that if I stopped, even for a moment, I might start hearing that voice again. Or worse, I might start answering it. I don't remember how I made it back to a road. I don't remember much of anything after the sun rose. Just waking up in a ditch with my phone at 3% and an emergency alert blinking across the screen. No service, location unknown. I didn't go straight home after that night. I told myself I needed answers first, proof that I wasn't going insane, that what I saw, what I heard, wasn't just some exhausted hallucination. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brushed up against something that wasn't supposed to be found. So I booked a motel in the next town over, something cheap but open 24/7. The kind of place with buzzing fluorescent lights, carpet stains that told stories, and a front desk clerk who didn't ask questions. I liked that. It let me pretend for a night that everything was normal. I kept my phone plugged in beside me, obsessively refreshing GPS apps, Google Maps, Apple Maps, offline caches, even some old navigation apps I hadn't used since college. But no matter what I tried, one thing never changed. That town, it wasn't there. Not on satellite view, not in street maps, not even in archived layers from years past. It was gone, like someone had highlighted the area and hit delete. But then, something stranger happened. Around 3:17 a.m. my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen, Google Maps notification, but I hadn't touched anything. The app had opened on its own. A route was already selected, my current location to a destination simply labeled home. Except, it wasn't my address. It was that place, that impossible town. And when I tapped to view the route details, the path rearranged itself. Roads I didn't recognize snaked through neighborhoods that didn't exist, through forests where no trails had ever been, through entire blank spots in the terrain. I backed out of the app, but the route reloaded on its own. A pop-up appeared. Faster route found. Estimated arrival, 4:44 a.m. I closed the app. It reopened, closed it again, stopped it. Disabled location services. Still reopened. My phone, like my car the night before, wasn't mine anymore. It was guiding me back. And part of me wanted to follow. I stared at the screen as the ETA ticked down. 42 a.m., 4:41.440. The route glowed in red like it was urgent, like it needed me to obey. Roads that didn't exist curled across the map like veins. Some had no names. Others were labeled things like Wittershin Way or North Exit 0, which felt wrong, like placeholders in a system that hadn't meant to be seen. I powered the phone off entirely. It turned itself back on. Not instantly, but within seconds. Like it had waited for me to think I was safe, then made its move. The same map reappeared on launch. Same route. Same red glow. Same cursed destination. I threw the phone against the motel wall. It hit the drywall, hard, bounced, and landed face up on the floor. Still glowing. Still active. The ETA now read, approaching in 2 minutes. Approaching? I wasn't driving anywhere. That's when I heard it. The hum. Low at first, like a passing semi on the highway, but it grew louder, closer, more mechanical, almost wet, like something breathing through machinery. It came from outside the motel room. I froze. The hum settled into a steady drone, like idling engines, but uneven, stuttering in a rhythm that didn't feel natural. It was right outside my window. I crept to the curtain and peeked out. No vehicles, just fog, thick, pale, and pulsing slightly, like it was alive. A dim red glow flickered inside it, moving slowly up the motel drive, approaching door to door, searching. I backed away. The motel room TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, and then the map appeared. Again. This time there was no route, just a blinking red dot hovering over my room's location and the words, "You're already here." I ran. Didn't grab my bag, my wallet, my keys, nothing. Just bolted barefoot into the night, across the gravel lot, into the field behind the motel. I didn't know where I was going. Only that ping had found me. I didn't stop running until the sky began to pale with morning. My feet were torn up, my lungs ached, and my heart felt like it was caught in a permanent spasm. I didn't even know which direction I'd gone. I just knew that whatever that thing was, it hadn't followed me. Or if it had, it was taking its time. Eventually, I collapsed behind a diner off a rural highway. The cook saw me first. Matted hair, no shoes, bleeding feet, trembling hands, and came out holding a phone, already dialing 911. I told them I'd been mugged. It was easier than explaining the truth. How do you even begin to explain something like that? That your phone took control of itself, that GPS apps were guiding you to a town no one's ever heard of, that the fog outside your motel room breathed, and that a map appeared on the television with your exact location. You don't. You just sit in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a foil blanket, nodding and pretending the tetanus shot is the most traumatic thing you've experienced that night. But inside, something had shifted. I started checking maps obsessively after that. Any app I could find. I'd open and close them, then reopen, just to make sure they stayed normal. I began collecting physical maps too. Ones I could hold and touch, ones that couldn't update themselves. Atlases, road guides, old Rand McNally's from thrift stores. Every time I unfolded one, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread, because the town wasn't there. But what if one day it was? What if one fold too many, one crease in the wrong place, revealed something that had always been hiding, like a secret printed in ink the world agreed not to read? Even now, sometimes when I zoom out on my phone's map app, I swear I see a flicker, a glitch, a red dot that appears and vanishes in the middle of nothing. And the timestamp underneath is 4:44 a.m. Every time. This happened about 2 months after the map incident. I was still traveling for work, though a lot less eagerly now. My assignments had started to blur together. Motels became interchangeable. The roadside diners all served the same soggy fries. I kept my head down and avoided conversations. People were distractions. People noticed things. And I didn't want anyone noticing me, not after what I'd seen. That night I was cutting through the high desert of Nevada. It was about 2:15 a.m., dead quiet except for the low hum of my rental car's engine and the occasional static burst from the radio. The road ahead was pitch black, no cell service, no lights for miles. I wasn't scared, just numb. A kind of learned paranoia had replaced panic. I didn't expect to find comfort in the road. I just didn't want to find anything else. That's when the fuel light blinked on. I cursed under my breath. I was in the middle of nowhere, between Caliente and Pioche, maybe 25 miles in either direction. I checked the glove box. No paper map, of course. I couldn't trust my phone after last time, even if it did have a signal, which it didn't. I was about to turn back, maybe head toward the faint glow I thought I saw to the west, when I spotted it. A sign, barely illuminated in my headlights. Gas, groceries, cold drinks, next left. I slowed down, confused. I'd taken this road before. I didn't remember any station out here. There were no driveways, no ramps, just empty desert. But there it was, a break in the scrub brush and a dirt path just wide enough for one car. I hesitated. The road felt too intentional, like someone had been waiting for me to notice it. But the fuel light blinked again. I turned. The dirt path crunched beneath my tires. The car vibrated over the uneven ground, and as the desert swallowed the highway behind me, I saw it appear ahead, glowing dimly through the dust. A lone gas station flickering under a dying neon sign that simply read, "Here." The closer I got, the more I realized how wrong it looked. The gas station didn't belong to any chain. No Shell, no Chevron, not even a rundown mom-pop name like Pete's Fuel. Just "Here," spelled out in buzzing red neon with a few letters half dead. The rest of the station was trapped in time. 1950s pumps with analog dials, a single glass door leading into a convenience shop that looked abandoned from the outside. The windows were grimy, streaked with something that wasn't quite dust. Or maybe it was just the way the dim lights hit it. Still, I pulled in, engine sputtering. I stepped out and was hit with silence. Not desert silence, real silence. No wind, no insects, not even the crunch of gravel under my boots. It felt like the world had been put on pause the moment I crossed onto the station's lot. The pump was old, sure, but it had a card reader. Weird. Out of place. I slid my card in, waited. Nothing. No beep, no denial. Just stillness. Then the numbers rolled on the screen. Gallons, 0.0. Amount, 0.00. Ready to pump. I hadn't touched anything. I glanced toward the shop. A light had come on inside. Warm, yellow, inviting. But I hadn't seen it turn on. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed. Not electronically, but a real brass bell, like in an old western. Inside, it smelled like dust and melted plastic. The shelves were full of snacks with labels I didn't recognize. Off-brand chips, candy bars with names like Zeeds and Corn Crack. Expiration dates were missing, blacked out, or printed in gibberish. And behind the counter was a man, or something trying to be a man. His skin looked stretched, like it had been pulled over the shape of a person but hadn't quite fit. He smiled at me without blinking and said, in a voice that crackled like a bro, "Ken Speaker, you made it just in time." I froze. "I just need gas," I mumbled. He nodded. "You already pumped." I turned to look out the window. The pump read, gallons 13.66, amount 0 salt. I don't know what made me walk out without saying another word, fear, instinct, or the cold realization that none of this was meant for me. I just backed away from the counter, the man, or thing, still smiling at me without blinking, his head tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I stepped outside, half expecting to be swallowed by fog or pulled back in, but nothing stopped me. The pump handle was still in my tank, even though I'd never touched it. The gauge on my car now read full. The engine, which had been sputtering moments earlier, roared back to life the moment I turned the key. No charge, no receipt, no logic. Just a full tank in a dead town that shouldn't exist. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The gas station was gone, not faded, gone. Like it had never been there. The gravel road was just empty scrubland again. No pumps, no neon sign, no man with stretched skin, just the long, desolate path behind me and the endless nothing ahead. I drove in silence. No music, no radio, no GPS. I didn't even know if I was still in the world anymore. But here's the thing that really haunts me. When I finally found my way back to civilization, days later, starved and sleep-deprived and shaking, I checked my bank statement. There was one charge, just one. Here station, $0. Approved, approved. I didn't imagine it. It was real, or real enough to leave a trace. I've shown people the charge. No one can find anything about it. No company, no owner, not even a zip code attached to the transaction. It was like it existed only for me, long enough to trap me, test me, and then vanish again. I haven't driven that far out into the desert since. But sometimes late at night, my phone buzzes with a notification I can't open. Just one word in all caps. Here. I'd started avoiding chain motels by that point. Something about their bright signs and sterile, mass-produced rooms made me feel more alone, not less. I preferred the older, quiet places tucked behind forgotten highways, the kind that barely showed up on Google Maps and were almost always run by someone named Dot or Walt. That night it was cold, unseasonably cold for Arizona in the spring. I'd been driving through patches of mist all afternoon, and by the time I found the Sunset Hollow Inn, I was too tired to care how run down it looked. The neon sign was buzzing, and half the letters didn't light up. It just read, UNHOTEL Inn. Good enough. I parked beneath a broken floodlight and walked into the front office. The man behind the counter didn't say much, just asked for my name, slid over a key with a plastic tag that said Room 12, and mumbled something about neighbors keeping quiet tonight. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I was too exhausted to ask. The room itself was cleaner than I expected. Faded floral wallpaper, creaky twin bed, a desk bolted to the wall, and a small CRT television with rabbit ears. No Wi-Fi, no welcome brochure, just the basics. As I unpacked, I noticed something strange. There was no room 11. Room 10 was across from me, and room 13 was down the hall, but the door next to mine was completely unmarked. No number, no sign, nothing. Just a blank door with chipped paint and a rusted knob. At first I figured maybe it was a storage room or an old utility closet. Motels like this had all kinds of weird renovations over the years. But later, just as I was drifting off, I heard something from behind that door. Not voices, not footsteps. Breathing. Long, low, wet-sounding breathing. Like someone trying not to be noticed, but failing. I froze. And then I heard it. 3 sharp knocks. Not at my door, at the one next to mine. The door with no number. The sound of the knocks echoed down the narrow hallway like they'd been amplified. Too sharp, too deliberate. I sat upright in bed, my heart doing that uneven skip it always does when something's wrong, but you can't yet explain why. I waited. No more knocks. Just breathing again. Closer this time. Slower. Wet. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming through the wall. I crept over to it. There was no vent between the rooms, no visible seam in the plaster, just old wallpaper peeling slightly at the corners. But the sound was definitely behind it, so close I could almost feel the breath pushing against the other side. I wanted to believe it was plumbing, or maybe the wind, but when I pressed my ear to the wall, I swear I heard a whisper. A voice, dry, raspy, like it hadn't spoken in years. It said, "I know you're there." I stumbled back from the wall and nearly tripped over my own shoes. I thought about grabbing my keys and leaving right then, but part of me didn't want to draw attention. I'd heard stories, people vanishing from roadside motels, found days later in ditches or not at all. I wasn't about to become one. So instead I turned on the TV to drown out the silence. Static, every channel. Even that didn't feel safe. Then the knob on the door next to mine started to turn. I stared at it through the peephole in my door, and watched as the handle to that blank room twisted, but didn't open. It didn't click. It just turned and turned, like someone was testing it, or maybe like it was jammed, or locked from the inside. Except the man at the desk had said I was the only guest on that side of the building. I sat there, on the floor, back pressed against the door, listening, and then something scraped along the floor inside that room, slowly, like dragging a heavy object. No. Not an object, something crawling. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I stayed there on the floor for hours, clutching my phone. Though I had no bars and no Wi-Fi to call out, I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that it was just an old building full of strange noises, but that lie didn't hold for long. At some point past 3 a.m., the scraping stopped. The breathing didn't. It kept going, steady and low, like whoever, or whatever, was in that room had fallen asleep against the shared wall. It was so close I could almost feel the warmth of it radiating through the plaster. I told myself I'd leave at first light. I'd pack up, drop the key on the counter, and drive until I saw a Denny's and a cell tower. But as the first light of dawn filtered through the worn-out blinds, something inside me snapped. I had to know. I cracked the door and stepped into the hallway, barefoot, heart thudding. The motel was silent. The air had that early morning chill, the kind that makes everything feel too still, like time hasn't fully resumed. I walked to the unmarked door, just once, just to listen. There was nothing. No breathing, no movement. Silence. I touched the knob. Cold. I turned it slowly. Locked. Then behind me, I heard the front desk bell ring. I turned and saw no one. I walked out, got in my car, didn't look back. Later, I called the motel from the road. Just curiosity. The number was disconnected. I looked it up on Google Maps. No reviews, no website, not even a pin, like it had never existed. It haunts me, the idea that I stayed somewhere off the map, somewhere not entirely part of this world, that someone, or something, knew I was there, and that it wanted me to know it was there too. To this day, I still avoid roadside motels, especially ones with missing numbers, and especially ones with rooms that aren't supposed to exist. I was driving back from my sister's place in Oregon, a 10-hour haul with nothing but mountains, valleys, and ghost towns between there and home. I'd made the trip a dozen times, but this time I took a detour, hoping to shave off 30 minutes. Big mistake. It was late, maybe 11:45 p.m., when I started getting drowsy. The road had narrowed to a cracked two-lane with no lights, no gas stations, no signs. Just me and the pine trees pressing in on either side, swallowing up the high beams. I had half a tank and a playlist queued, but even that didn't help. My eyelids kept sagging. So I did what I always do when the sleepiness creeps in. I switched to radio. Something about the unpredictability of it keeps my brain a little more alert. I figured I'd find some late-night classic rock, maybe a sleepy talk show. But there were no stations, just static. I scanned the dial manually, one notch at a time, hoping to catch anything. For a moment, I thought I heard a voice. Then it was gone. Then right at 12:03 a.m., the dial locked onto a frequency. It didn't show any numbers, just a blank screen. And then a song started playing. A slow, melancholy melody. Old, maybe from the 50s or 60s, but I couldn't place it. The singer's voice was low and muffled, like it was recorded underwater or off a warped vinyl. The lyrics were odd. Something about the road that forgets, and wheels spinning backward into dust. I thought it was some late-night art project, some college kid's experimental station. But then the song ended, and played again. And again. Same scratchy recording, same off-key piano. And I realized there were no DJ breaks, no commercials, no station ID, just that one song, over and over. I tried switching to Bluetooth. Nothing. My phone wouldn't connect. I tried turning off the radio. It wouldn't turn off. I pressed the power button harder, held it down. No thing. The song just kept playing. That's when the road curved, even though my GPS still showed it as a straight line. I slowed down as the road twisted, tight and sudden, like it hadn't been there moments ago. The trees pressed closer now, black silhouettes against a starless sky. My GPS went blank, the screen flickering once before freezing on a loading icon. And the song, it didn't just loop anymore, it changed. The melody was the same, but the lyrics had shifted, slightly at first, just a word or two. Then entire lines. Now the singer was murmuring something about waking up behind your own eyes and being watched through mirrors. The voice was deeper, slurred, slower. It felt aware. I glanced at the display, still blank, still that unnamed station. The buttons refused to respond. My phone was dead too, battery at 80% when I started the drive, now just a black screen. Even the charger light was off. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe the looped track was messing with my head. But then I noticed something. The trees outside weren't moving. At all. I was driving. The tires were turning, the engine humming, but the forest outside looked frozen, like I was moving in place. No wind, no sway. Even the shadows didn't shift. And then, the road ended. Just like that. No warning, no sign, no fork, just a wall of trees. I hit the brakes, hard, and the car jolted to a stop. My headlights lit up the forest ahead, revealing something that made my stomach twist. The trees in front of me, they weren't trees. They were car-shaped. Hundreds of them, old, rusted vehicles, some half sunken into the dirt, some with moss growing through the windows. All of them arranged exactly like mine. Same model, same color, some with headlights still glowing dimly, some with cracked windshields and doors ajar. Every one of them pointed at me. And the Nang was louder now, like it was coming from all of them at once. A choir of decaying radios, all playing my station, all playing that song. I don't remember reversing the car. I don't remember turning it around. I don't even remember my hands on the wheel. But I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was driving back the way I came. Only now, the road behind me didn't look like anything I had seen before. No more trees, just darkness, the kind that swallows headlights whole. The kind that presses against your windows and makes you feel like you're sinking, not moving, like the world stopped and you're just drifting. And still, that song played. The lyrics had devolved into whispers, like they weren't even trying to rhyme anymore. They were talking to me, telling me things I didn't want to hear. You were always meant to come back. They all do, eventually. There is no outside. Every time I reached to turn the dial, the sound grew louder. Every time I shouted, it got inside my voice, mimicking me. My own voice started to echo the song. I kept driving. I don't know how long. Minutes, hours. Time didn't feel real anymore. Not in that place. Eventually, I saw the town again, or what pretended to be the town. It was like watching a film in reverse. The streets reassembled. The houses stood tall again. The signs unbent themselves. Everything went back to its normal version. Only now I could see the seams, the illusions, the stitched-together reality barely holding its shape. I parked back at the gas station, trembling. The radio finally went silent. My phone lit up for the first time in hours. It was 11:59 p.m. The second it hit midnight, the radio flared to life one more time. But now, the voice on it, it was mine. It played a recording of me saying everything I had just experienced, every word, every fear, every scream, like it had been listening the whole time, like it was waiting. I didn't plan on going back into town, but I had no choice. The fuel gauge was sinking. Again, despite barely driving, the food I had left was gone when I checked my backpack that morning. Not eaten, not spoiled, just gone, like it had never been there, like the town decided I didn't need it anymore. And so, with nowhere else to go, I walked back down that hollow main street. At first glance, everything looked untouched, clean, almost, like a movie set just before filming starts. But it was too clean, too still, no birds, no wind, not even dust on the sidewalks. I noticed it as soon as I passed the bakery, an old-fashioned little shop with a hand-painted sign and frosted glass windows. I swear I saw movement inside, a flicker of light, the outline of someone just standing in the dark. But when I stepped closer, nothing. Just racks of perfectly placed bread. No dust, no mold, no scent of yeast, not real. Next was the tailor shop, then the hardware store, then the little apothecary with dried herbs hanging in the window. And each one felt like it was watching me. I don't mean I saw anyone inside. I mean I felt observed. Like the moment I turned my back, the mannequins in the tailor shop would blink. Like the bolts in the hardware store were keeping count of how long I lingered. Like the jars in the apothecary were whispering to each other about what part of me they'd keep in a bottle next. I tried to ignore it, kept my head down, kept walking. But then I passed a narrow store with no name, just a wide glass window, and in it, lined up neatly on a long shelf, were dozens of little figurines, each one a perfect replica of me, in different poses, wearing different expressions, one with my jacket, one with my torn shirt, one holding my phone, one with blood on its hands, and right in the center, a brand new one. Still warm, still wet with paint, still drying. I froze. The figurines stared back, every one of them a warped echo of my image, some wide-eyed in terror, some mid-scream, others smiling in ways I've never smiled. Their eyes glinted, tiny flecks of glass or stone, perfectly placed. The newly painted one, it hadn't been there when I first glanced in, I'm sure of it. Its eyes were still glossy, reflecting the dull gray light from above. The expression it wore wasn't just me. It was how I felt in that moment, the exact mix of confusion, dread, and quiet unraveling. I leaned in, pressing my face closer to the glass. That's when I saw the tag beneath it. My name. Not just a name, my full name, middle name, the spelling only my mother used, and scrawled beneath it, shaky, uneven ink, was today's date. Today, not yesterday, not last week. Today. I stumbled back from the window, and the lights inside the shop flicked on. One by one, behind the figurines, ceiling bulbs clicked to life, buzzing faintly. And behind the figurines, behind the glass, a curtain shifted. Something was back there. Watching. Waiting. I turned to run, but the street had changed. The storefronts had shifted positions. The tailor shop was no longer behind me. The bakery had vanished entirely. The street signs were blank. And the pavement. It was still there, but wrong. Warped, rippled, like I was walking on something soft, something alive. As I sprinted, I could feel them, the shops, pulling at my direction. A windless force guiding me toward something inevitable. I looked back once. The storefront with the figurines, its glass was now fogged up, but not with steam, not condensation. Fingerprints, dozens of small, perfect fingerprints pressing against the inside of the glass. Some dragging down slowly, some tapping, some spelling out something. I didn't stop to read. I ran until my lungs screamed and my legs felt like split. Turd wood. I didn't care where I was going, anywhere but there, anywhere but in view of those windows. I didn't stop running until the sky changed. Not lightened, just changed. It was like the color reset itself. The clouds thinned slightly, the air smelled different. The buildings around me returned to some semblance of normal. Worn brick, graffiti, the sound of distant cars. I knew I hadn't left the town. But whatever part I was in before, I had somehow crossed out of it. But I never forgot the way the figurines tracked me. That's the part that sits in my bones even now. I wasn't just seeing myself reflected, I was being studied, replicated, like something was trying to understand me, or replace me. And when I finally found a real street sign again, it had my last name spelled backward, like some kind of inside joke only the town understood. I remember standing under that sign, gasping for air and realizing no one would believe me. Not just because it sounded insane, but because even I was struggling to believe it. My rational brain wanted to explain it away. Stress, fatigue, low blood sugar, an elaborate art installation. But those fingerprints, that name tag, the emotion in the figurine's face. I know what I saw. I know how I felt. For weeks after I left that place, mirrors and windows unsettled me. I avoided my own reflection like it might blink or move when I didn't. Every time I passed a boutique or a curio shop, I felt a tug, a nausea in my gut, like something was still watching from behind glass, waiting for me to look again. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if I ever really left, if maybe the town just changed again, put on a new disguise to keep me calm. But what haunts me most? There were more figurines in that shop than just mine. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each one with a name tag. Someone carved them, labeled them, displayed them, and if I was one of them, who else's? It started with a folded paper I found under the windshield wiper. I'd just come back to the car after trying to retrace my path through the town. Every street seemed to bend back into another. No way out. I had been looping for hours, disoriented, exhausted, and then there it was, this crinkled, yellowed piece of paper just sitting on the glass. I hadn't seen anyone nearby. I hadn't heard anyone approach, but someone had left it for me. It wasn't just a normal map, no logos, no highway markers, just hand-drawn roads, thick black ink, and little landmarks I didn't recognize. The Beltree, mouth of the earth, house with no windows, all of it sketched in frantic lines as if someone had drawn it while shaking. At the bottom, scrawled in a different kind of ink, red and faded, were the words, "This helped me leave. Maybe it'll help you too." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't want to trust it. Everything here reeked of deception. Half-real buildings, impossible storefronts, phones that called themselves, but some small part of me, the desperate part, clung to hope. Maybe someone had made it out. Maybe this really was a way through. So I opened the car door, turned off the engine to save fuel, and set off on foot with the map clenched in my hand. Almost immediately, the world around me felt different. Not in the way that buildings changed shape or time slipped, but it was like the map created its own gravity. I couldn't help but follow the path, even when it cut through alleys I'd never noticed, behind houses that shouldn't have had backyards, or into wooded areas that weren't on my GPS at all. Every time I considered turning back, I'd glance at the map, and somehow I'd already taken the next step, as if it knew, as if it anticipated me, and the deeper I went, the less the town resembled a town. The roads narrowed, the sky darkened again, the air too, onto fog, and then I saw it. The bell tree, just like the map had promised. The bell tree stood alone in a sunken clearing, surrounded by crooked stones like a graveyard swallowed by time. It was massive, at least 3 stories high, and completely bare of leaves. But from every blackened branch, dozens of tarnished brass bells hung by threadbare ropes. None of them moved, not in the windless air, not even when I approached. I checked the map again. A red X was marked directly under the tree. Something about it felt final. I hesitated. My shoes crunched over brittle ground as I stepped closer. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. Ring one of the bells? Stand under the branches? The map didn't say. It never had. And then, just as I stood beneath it, one bell moved. No wind, no touch. It began to sway gently, side to side, emitting a faint, eerie chime that didn't echo. It just stopped in the air. The sound hung there like a breath caught in the throat. Then another bell chimed. Then 5. Then all of them. A cacophony of dead metal filled the clearing, each ring slightly off-tempo, like they were mimicking a language I couldn't understand. The sound made my head spin. I grabbed the base of the tree to steady myself and felt something beneath the soil. Wooden, square, a hatch. I dug with my fingers until the dirt gave way and uncovered a small trap door. No lock, no latch, just a rusted ring. I pulled. The wood groaned like it hadn't been opened in decades, and a foul gust of air poured out, hot, damp, and coppery. A staircase descended into darkness. No light, no smell of earth, just a black void that hummed with distant whispers. I should have turned back. I should have closed it and walked away. But the bells fell silent the moment I touched the first step. I felt a pressure in my chest, like being pulled forward by something I couldn't see, but could feel. And so I descended, map in hand, into the darkness beneath the bell tree. Whatever was down there was waiting. The steps seemed endless. They twisted like a spiral, but not downward, more like inward, as if folding into something tighter than the earth could hold. I don't remember how many I took. I just remember the deeper I went, the louder the whispers became. Not voices exactly, more like imprints of thought, echoes of grief, memory-stained air. Some of them sounded like my own voice, but speaking things I've never said. I shouldn't have looked. I was supposed to forget. I followed the wrong map. I tried to stop and go back. My hand reached for the wall, but there was no wall, just smooth, cold, nothing. The map had become damp in my hand, ink bleeding through as if it, too, was being rewritten. At the bottom, the stairs ended in a small, circular chamber lit by an amber glow coming from the ceiling, but there was no source of light. In the center was a table, and on it, a map. An exact replica of mine, but newer, more detailed. There were roads I hadn't seen, symbols I couldn't understand, and right in the center, an X blinking faintly. I turned it over. My name was scrawled on the back in handwriting that wasn't mine, but I recognized it. It was my father's. I hadn't thought about him in years. He'd gone missing when I was a teenager, vanished during a solo hiking trip. The only thing they found was a soaked backpack and a torn map. I never saw the map. Until now. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at that trembling mark where he'd written my name. Was he here? Had he followed this same trail? Had he made it out? The bells above ground began ringing again. I grabbed the new map, shoved it into my jacket, and climbed. When I emerged, the clearing was empty. The bell tree was gone. The stones, the trapdoor, even the path, gone. The only thing in my hand was the new map. And now, every time I try to throw it away or burn it, it comes back. Folded neatly, waiting. I wasn't supposed to be driving that late. The fog had started around dusk, light and patchy at first, then thicker, heavier, until it swallowed the beams of my headlights whole. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and the road signs had stopped making sense, just numbers and symbols, like they belonged to another country, or another time. I was trying to make it home after a business trip, one that had already run longer than it should have. My GPS had lost signal miles back. Every turn felt like a guess. I should have pulled over and waited it out, but there was nowhere to stop. No gas stations, no shoulders, just an endless 2-lane strip with trees pressing in from both sides, the kind of dark that feels like it's watching. Then I saw it. A neon flicker in the distance, red and blue, maybe purple, hard to tell through the haze. I slowed as it came into view. Motel. One word, all caps, blinking slowly like it had a heartbeat. The building itself looked old. 1970s, maybe earlier. Single story, a row of 6 doors, all painted the same faded green. One office with a glowing open sign, flickering like it was on its last legs. I pulled in without thinking. I didn't question why there were no other cars, or why the air smelled like rust and mildew before I even got out. I was just relieved. The bell above the office door jingled weakly when I stepped inside. The front desk was empty, but a little bell sat on the counter. I rang it once. A man appeared from the back. Late 50s, maybe 60s. Hair slicked back, skin waxy, eyes too alert for someone working a graveyard shift. He didn't ask where I came from or where I was headed. He just smiled and said, "One night." I nodded. He slid a key across the counter. An actual metal key, not a card. Room 3. "No checkout time," he said like it was a joke. I took the key and the door closed behind me on its own. Room 3 was colder than the night outside. The air had that motel smell, cleaning chemicals not quite covering old smoke and something deeper, like wet plaster or rot. There were no windows, just thick curtains nailed into the wall as if to fake the illusion of one. The TV was an old tube model. It turned on without me touching it, flickering to static, then cutting to black. The key was heavy in my pocket. I never took it out. I dropped onto the bed, still fully dressed. I wasn't tired, but I felt sedated. The kind of numb where your limbs forget they're part of you. I didn't sleep. The walls were thin. I could hear something in the room next door. Room 4. It sounded like pacing. Slow, deliberate footsteps back and forth. Then silence. Then the same pacing again, like someone resetting a pattern. I waited for it to stop. It didn't. I got up once and opened the door to the hallway. Cold air rushed in, but there were no sounds. Just the low hum of that flickering neon. I stepped out. The other doors had no numbers, just blank green slabs with chipped paint and old locks. But when I turned toward room 4, the number was there. Fresh, like it had just been painted. I pressed my ear to the door. No sound now. Then, I swear, I heard breathing. Long, shallow inhales, like someone inches away on the other side. I knocked once. The breathing stopped. I waited. Then a knock, one single knock, echoed back at me from room 2, on the other side of me. I turned. The number on room 2 was gone. I backed away slowly, heartbeat loud in my throat, until I was standing in front of my own room again, room 3. But the number was missing from my door too, and the key in my pocket now read, room 6. I hadn't moved. I hadn't touched anything. But the motel, it had changed something. Or maybe it was changing me. I stumbled back into the room, the one I thought was room 3, the D, or closed behind me on its own gently, like it was careful not to wake someone. I checked my phone. No signal. The date had changed. It was showing a day ahead. The battery icon blinked red, then the screen went black. I hadn't used it. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the motel key in my hand. Room 6. It was real. Cold. Heavy. Brass, not plastic. I tried to remember the drive here, how long it had taken, what roads I'd turned on, but the memory was smeared, like looking at a reflection in rippling water. All I could recall was the fog swallowing the road behind me. I didn't leave the room until morning, if you could call it that. When the sun finally rose, if it was the sun, it was more like a dull, off-white glow, the kind of light that makes shadows disappear but doesn't warm anything. I walked outside. There were no cars in the lot, no front desk, no sign of the main road. The town, what little of it I could see, was still and gray, like a forgotten film set with no crew. I tried walking. Every direction looked the same, rows of identical buildings with no signs, no people, no windows. Eventually I gave up and sat on the curb outside the motel, breathing air that didn't feel like oxygen, just something else. Hours later, or minutes, I don't even know, I saw my car again, parked where I hadn't left it, right under the neon sign that now just read EL. I got in. The key worked. The engine started. No fog this time, no turns, no map, just a straight drive out, and suddenly, I was back on the interstate. No town behind me, nothing on the GPS. It's been months. I've tried searching for that road, for that town. It doesn't exist. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the knock on the wall, and the motel key, room 6, is still in my coat pocket. I never put it there.